ختي ملكوتو خاور زايو داخل بشمية برا هلا نخمة سنقانا قديم يوم شغلان جناهاتا داخل بقنا شغلان داني ودلو جناها الله يا ما إلا شغل نور جوراب الله باصرا بيشا سبب ديو خيلها ملكوتا وخيلة وتشبخت العالم عالمين آمين هيمانوتا بشميتا شميتا لنزمتا الله بارك لكم على قبل صلواتكم باوياتكم شينت دي كلكم و هلبت خجاب بيناني سبب اتلناشت لي برمي سورة وبتدخل بسورة وبإنجليز سو احنا هم كده بنتكلم انجليز ان اني لا يبدي سورة سو جاري خاطر لك تشكرون رابس باي همزومه وقت من مودي همزومه من ايفانجيليون ات يوحنا ذا so همزومه وقت من the book of or the gospel of John right so كلن بالت بيلان قد هم زملن باست يوحنا ماني لكنتا قد ماسخ فرميخ كمودي ودخي قد مارن يقول لقدية أي ديتا أو كتابة قديشة ات جليانا كمان اللي يقول لك يوحنا so we know that John is the one that's gonna write later on to us the book of Revelation so it's not only he wrote the gospel but he wrote 3 letters and then he wrote the gospel the book of Revelation as well. So he wrote 5 books, right? So بالت يوخد يوحنا كتير له 5 كتاب. So هم شايطخ قد موسى شوريه له بالبريتا ويوحنا فرقة لكتابة قديشة بال Revelation, yeah? Giliana. Good? So Moses started the Bible with the Old Testament with the book of Genesis and John the beloved of Jesus, he wrote the Revelation, which is the end of the Bible. It means the last book in the Bible. And then if we take both of them, we're going to see that Genesis is coming back according to the way it was from the beginning. That's what Revelation reveals to us. Okay? And that's what Genesis, it gives us some way to look at the world, the way God made everything from the beginning, and Genesis completes into that way in Genesis 21. Okay? So, the book of John, or the Gospel of John. So we have to understand there is the Gospel, and there is the letters, and then there is the book of Revelation that John wrote. So, we talked about that the disciple that Jesus loved, that is how he was called. He was never called by his name. Always disciples, mo yamrewa, the one that Jesus loves. Who you talking about? Ahmed Mshichat Ibayile. And that's why we will never see anything that says John, except we're not going to see his name. But for him, for the way he respected John the Baptist, he didn't call him John the Baptist. He called him only John. Everybody else called him John the Baptist. But John, respecting John the Baptist, and because of his humbleness, he called him John. يوحنا معمدانا يوحنا قرية أختي يوحنا ليلة قرية يوحنا معمدانا مرداني وينجالستاخين. The other evangelicals, they called him John the Baptist, but John called him John only, respecting him, and that would like you enter, please, and that's his humbleness. Okay?
Why don't you put it next to you, Baba?
It's gone. Okay.
Why don't you put it next to you?
So Meran, in all the book we're gonna see that he is
I
called
want to see.
the disciple that Jesus loved. Even in John 13:23. So أن كل متيري قد يوم كمودي قد خزخ that he was always called the disciple that Jesus loved. And that is why even here it says whom Jesus loved. It's always a disciple. And what did we say about John? We said John always put his head on Jesus' shoulder, on Jesus' heart. He was that close to Jesus. That's the difference between John and the other apostles. موديو فرقوتا باليوخنن وبلدان تلميذ خينه يورابا قرب مارن رابوا يعني مختمر خليصة بتمارن رابطوا عليه الصورة بالمشيخة ولا ماشي يوبرون خالته إنا أبد يوبرون خالته وبيابو يوبرون خالته إنا أبوش قربالي ويوخنن. So Yochanan, John was always close to Jesus Christ. He always put his head on the shoulder of Jesus Christ. And that's why he loved Jesus more than the other apostles. Even when Jesus was arrested, they all ran away, except John. كله رجلوا يمن قم دوق المشيخة. إن ماني خش ياخد سخيفة يوحنا. And that is the question we gotta ask ourselves. How close are we to Jesus Christ when it comes for either denying Jesus or putting our lives for Jesus? What did Peter do? He denied Jesus.
3 times.
What did Thomas say? He doubted Jesus. Right? But John didn't. John went right under the cross. John stood there. And that's why Jesus, he said to his mother, he said, Mother, take your son. He gave her to who? He gave her to John. He didn't give her to the other apostles. And that's why when they were in the boat after Jesus was risen, who was the only one that recognized Jesus? Man standing on the other end of the Galilee river, and he said, that is Jesus. Who did? John. All the other apostles didn't know. He said, that is the one that I love. That's him. That's the one. From far away, he recognized him. And that's what it is. Do you recognize Jesus when you see him? Can you see Jesus? That's the question. How close are you to Jesus? And that is the relationship that you built with Jesus in those 3.5 years. That is how you build a relationship with Ishu Nasraya, Ishu Barnasha. That is the relationship that John built with Jesus. Kamada hamma sha'i warisha sadrat maran, hamma sha'i baqare wa ubtil mida yamrewa, murun qadawa ibayilem shikha, murun na'am baqar min shikha. They always will say, ask this one. He is the one, the beloved of Jesus. He is the one that's close to you. Ask him to ask Jesus. See? While they're sitting and eating together. Come on. Sab mutiwa qurbal maran, mutiba iwa kamshikha. And that's why Jesus came and said, what did he say? He said, among you, there is one, or Peter asked about him. He said, what about him? He said, what about him? He said, don't worry about him because he will not die until I come back. He will not die until I come back. Why did Jesus say that? He talked about John. Come on, Sabab, he was going to give him the revelation. So Jesus came to Patmos to give John the revelation. See? They tried to kill John in every aspect of torture. But he didn't die. Well, this guy has demons. Just put him in the island. So they threw him in the island, where all the bad prisoners were there, all the bad killers. But what did he do? He preached to them, and he brought them to Jesus, and he baptized them. Okay? So that is who John was. So John Rabba, actually that's why we said all the other 3 Gospels are very close to each other. But we're going to see John is the only different one. In a lot of ways, he doesn't write anything about Jesus' humanity as much as he's writing about his divine. بس يوحنا بيكتب بس على هود مشيخة. So when Matt takes 2 late, right? Matthew wrote to the Jewish. And then he described Jesus as a king, because they were waiting for a king. And he started his book with what? He started with the son of David, because they were waiting for the son of David. And then Luke wrote for the Greeks. And then the Greeks, they like stories, right? So he wrote most of the parables. Where are you going to find the parables? In Luke. You're not going to find any parables in John. Why? Because John doesn't waste time on anything earthly. He only concentrates on the divine. Okay? John concentrates on John, he writes for the world. But Mark كمان إيكاتو مرقس إيكاتو كروماية وروماية بايمن دي كيريا وكوليا. Okay? The Romans want everything short and sweet. They want you to get to the point. That's why he wrote the least. He wrote the least. But we said the book of John is about 3 parts. Every 7 parts, because it's 21 chapters. كل شوى اتلوخايكا. The 7 chapters will tell us about what we said. About the light of Jesus Christ. He is the light. And the other 7 will tell us about the love of God to us. And we're talking about the love of God to us. And the last 3, and Shawahina Modina, Hamzami Basit, the everlasting life. Right? So we have it divided in the light, the love, and the life, the everlasting life. So that is how it comes, and we're going to see it all together. And the first time we're going to hear that Mare Lekadian God so loved the world. Right? So we talked again about John in 21:20, and then we said, therefore the Gospel of John reveals the message of God's true love to mankind. So messages, it's always from the beginning has been telling us about the true love of mankind. Okay? The true love of mankind. It's the whole book, but then John reveals to us this love of God to us. And modi maran jaya kame tabkhazikhle you gospel kad in Zealand Matthew hamzume le bas barnashute, in Zealand John hamzume le basit alahute. And John here talks to us about from the beginning there was the word, and we talked about the word. Okay? That Jesus is the word. Utor yudain halbat lebo ihmar kallu qadan dina viya minna shabtat warra yan shabat warru. Okay. So we talked about John 1:1 and John 1:14, and we merged them together, and we pulled out a picture of Jesus Christ. Why? Because for instance we took John 1:1, and then in the 14, what did we take? In the beginning was the Word. That's part of John 1:1. The second part, modile, and the Word became flesh. That was in John 1:14. So we put the lines together. 1:1 we took, and the Word was with God in 1:14 and dwelt among us. You see? So ayya kullo bigirashqwa ughzilan 1:1, and the Word was God. And then we take to 1:14 we took, and we beheld, because we saw His glory, the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. So and we talked about the chapters. We talked about that 77 times mentioned the word Alma or Alam. Where? In the book of John. We're going to see that. Why? Because he is talking to the world. Everybody else is talking to different race. One is talking to the Jews, one is talking to the Romans, one is talking to the Greeks, but John is the only one that's talking to the world. Very well. So we said from chapter 1 to 7 we talk about eternal life, and then from 8 to 12 we talk about the light of the world, that Jesus is the light of the world, and then from 13 to 21 that love to mankind. Right? Right? And we talked about this in details. Very good. So we talked about between the Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they all talk about the same thing, but John talks about different things. John wants to only concentrate on the divine of Jesus. So ليه همزن باسد خرمشة، ليه همزن باسد genealogy دي، ليه همزن باسد مولدات دي، ليه همزن باسد parables مشي خلاء همزوم اللي بحكي خزك أحكي man to man, like Jesus with Nicodemus, Jesus with the Samaritan woman, Jesus with the Roman, Jesus with the people face to face. So it's always God with man meeting, so he can tell them that he is God, okay? And he showed them that he is God, okay? So we talked about John 3:16. We talked about 1 John 4:19, because we're talking about the message of God, of love. Alaha shudara kadiyan message. We love him because he first loved us. Umzimlan bazdayala. Kambayikhle sabab awon kamta kambayila. 1 John 4:19. Then we talked about Psalms 139, 1 through 1:3. And then we talked about how God knows everything. He searches us. He knows how we sit, how we walk, how we sleep, how we wake up, and all that. Then we talked about Matthew 10:29 through 31. And Jesus is trying to tell us even the hairs on your head are counted. Okay? It means the nonsense stuff that's in your life, to God matters. That a lot of people say, it doesn't matter to God, unfortunately. Ina mo ba ibang sinstawa kadisha? At min diyanet litlu manay, kislan, kisalaha, taymanena, upani min diyanet lektak nune basu. Rabas pipe. And then we said he created us. Why? All of this because he created us in his image. This is what's missing in faith today. If we know which part of us is God, we wouldn't be falling short of in faith. The only reason we fall short in faith because we don't know this part. Kam tarislan il salmidjane. In a mutqatta salmidjane, that is where man got confused. That's where man could not understand. If man understood this part, we would have not been lost the way we are in faith. We will know better. Dakhi mas par mekhla yana buzzoda. In alaha marakam bayin no khunkhadkha. Sabab itun salmi udameti, because you are in my image. Modi por mila barnasha min dawa salma udamet Allah. Zero, nothing. If we concentrate only on this part, we wouldn't fall into all these nonsense things in life. Okay? All these questions that don't make sense, things that pulls you away from faith, things that takes you out of this wisdom, okay? It just takes everything away from you, and it starts giving you the worldly wisdom because you didn't understand this part. In akhnan or the concentrate el dawa khabrat alaha kambarilan el salme udamete. What is left for us to understand? In ayya parmikhla parmikh kul mindi. There is nothing that can fool us. Qamodi khwaya fool, qamodi le bitaya khamindi bishqalo hemanutan u parmetan et alaha qambariran al-salme udamete ukharta ayya bkhashe la kullu bitlaqe. Sab oqta taluqh. Pale o bardo qta dile baba u yimma yuakal. Dile pagra. Once we go after the flesh, what happens? Once we go after the flesh, we lose this dignity. We lose our dignity. We lose our understanding. We lose our wisdom. We lose our divine. We are divine people in reality. Akhnan iwakh alahai. O qatat alahute talqikhle iman qad concentrate el do qatat barnasha buzzoda. Iman kullu takhmaniyatan shoqkhlu gobarnashuta. We take this part for granted. أول قطة جارك شقلخ له هم شو يخيوتا وهم شو أمرن أنا إيون صلمت علىها. Imagine if every day when you wake up you say, but I am God. I am made in the image of God. Right? If we are made in the image of God, what can fool us to take this beautiful thing out of us? See? Why is man fooled? So the enemy is trapping us easily because we're always looking at the flesh. And that's where things go wrong. So Leho Amrit, Ana even Sheikhaya in a Chaim with Pagra.